Give us a sense, when do you think inflation will peak? And maybe as important, how fast do you think it'll come down off that peak?
Well, it's good to be with you, David. Certainly, we are expecting an elevated CPI print tomorrow, and that will reflect the month of March. And the month of March is where we really will see and have seen the impact of President Putin's invasion of Ukraine on energy prices and other commodities. We know that because we've already seen what's happened to gas prices in the United States, and that will be reflected in what will likely be a big divergence between the headline and core. The real focus now here in terms of looking forward is what we can do to try to mitigate that run-up in prices. You've seen the president take some significant actions like the historic release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and how we can provide some relief to consumers who are feeling the brunt of those increases. Our hope is that if we can move forward on those efforts, we can stay focused on the task at hand, that we will see inflationary pressures moderate. Will be lower at the end of this year than we are today, and lower still in the coming year. That's our focus, and that's our hope.
Let me put you on the spot. I won't hold you to it, but when you say lower by the end of the year, how much lower? What would be your range on where we will be at the end of the year?
Look, I'm not going to make a specific point estimate. What I would say is that if we take the kinds of steps that we are focused on right now, we could provide meaningful relief in terms of the costs that typical Americans face. So gas prices is front of mind for people all over the country. We've seen since the president's announcement of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve some real moderation in the price of oil, and we are hoping and expecting we'll see that translate quickly here into reduction in the price of gas at the pump. Those are the kinds of things that we're focused on, and if we can get those things right, if we can get some partnership from Congress on things like semiconductors to try to alleviate some of the pressure on supply chain bottlenecks, then we'll be in a better place than if we just stand pat. So I'm not going to give you a specific example, a specific estimate, but I will tell you that these issues that we are focused on will matter in terms of what kind of relief we'll see.
Brian, you raised the question of supply chain. Let me pursue that in a very particular way. We're seeing the lockdown of Shanghai right now over in China. A lot of disruption, apparently, in the Chinese economy. Have you taken a look at that to determine what effect you think that might have on the supply chain and how it might affect some inflation right back here in the United States?
We are monitoring it closely, and is absolutely a concern, as we've seen over the course of the last 9 months. When we have disruptions in production activity or in port activity in Southeast Asia, it can have a compounding effect on the supply chains here in the U.S. The good news is that we are much better positioned than we were about 9 months ago to navigate and manage that. The throughput and the fluidity of our transportation supply chain has improved. If you look at the number of containers that are sitting at docks at LA and Long Beach for more than 9 days, the so-called dwell time that we were all very focused on over the course of the fall, that's come down about 60%. We're moving products through our ports more efficiently, in no small part because of the actions that we've taken. So we're better positioned, but certainly the kind of impacts that we're seeing across Asia in terms of COVID and also the supply impacts from the Russian economy are not helping things. So we've got to keep a close eye on those as they proceed.
Yeah, I want to come back and ask about those sanctions on Russia, specifically on the economic front. But before that, let me ask the flip side of the question, perhaps, on the inflation, and that is the possibility of recession. A lot of talk about that, as I'm sure you know. Bloomberg did a survey of 72 economists last week, said 27.5% chance of recession in 12 months. Larry Summers came out and said if it's 27.5 in 12 months, it's a lot higher in 24 months. What are your projections for a recession right now?
Well, we're monitoring all of those projections, and certainly, economists are always in the projection business and always modulating their projections. I think when we look at the current economy and the current economic circumstances, what stands out globally is the degree of resilience in the American economic recovery. So we are facing a lot of uncertainty. We're facing rocky waters right now, but the United States is probably better positioned than any other major economy to navigate effectively through them. Why is that? Strong economic growth, strong household balance sheets, a strong American consumer, and an incredibly strong labor market. So those are strengths that we have on our side that you are seeing less so in other major economies, which I think is why the risk is elevated more so in other economies than our own. But look, these are all risks that we have to navigate through. We have to keep a close eye on. And as we were talking about before, the more that we can work collectively to navigate these, for example, by helping to act collectively to put some downward pressure on the price of oil, the better.
So, Brian, when you talk about the resilience of the American economy, does that mean it's different this time? I mean, again, Larry Summers, you know him well, you've worked with him, says if you go back to World War II, it has always led to recession. We've been over 5% of the CPI and under 4% on unemployment. So it's 100% for recession. Do you think it's different this time?
Look, it's helpful to look historically, but it's also important to note that almost everything about this current recovery and this current economy is unique. We are coming out of a completely unique pandemic-induced shutdown and a pandemic-affected economic recovery through Delta and Omicron. The supply challenges we were just discussing of cross-border trade across water from Asia to the U.S. have affected our supply chains in ways that we've never had to navigate through before. And so just as the circumstances are unique that have gotten us to this point, you would expect that you'd see unique circumstances going forward. There's lots of elements about the supply bottlenecks that we are facing that, if we can resolve them, should start to have real moderating impacts on price pressures going forward in ways that wouldn't have been true in the past as well. So history is a guide, but we also really have to recognize the unique circumstances that we're in today.
And finally, Brian, I do want to come back to this huge story that we're all covering. I know you're following so closely at the White House, and that is what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, a lot of it's been on the ground and military, but there's also been a substantial economic component of it, led by the White House with our NATO allies. And I guess my question at this point is, from where you sit, from how you monitor your dashboard, it appears the Ukrainians at the moment have fought the Russians to a standstill militarily. Is Russia fighting the United States and our NATO allies to a standstill in terms of economy? The rubles come back, they cut their discount rate, and the $1 billion, I'm told, a day that they're getting out of Europe on energy really allows them to keep going for quite a while.
Like, absolutely not. The coordinated financial sanctions and economic steps that we have taken have surprised Vladimir Putin. They've surprised the world, and they've surprised the Russian economy in terms of their breadth and their severity. Anyone who looks at the Russian economy right now and says that they're in an okay place or they're fighting their way back just actually isn't looking at facts. You know why the ruble has rebounded. It's because they've closed off the economy. They've imposed capital controls. There's nothing like an actual global price to reflect the risks. They're in functional default. Their economy is projected to fall by anywhere from 10 to 20% this year. Look, the sanctions regime that we have put in place and we are now sustaining is dealing the Russian economy a crushing blow, but we've also been very clear, and this is true of economic statecraft and sanctions generally. You have to stay with it because those impacts will be felt and compounded across time, and we have to keep working to try to cut off avenues for the Russians to actually mitigate or undermine the impacts of that sanction package. That's the work that is underway. You've seen the president every step of the way working with allies and partners to try to keep this global coalition together. And we've surprised on the upside to date, and we're going to keep trying to do that.